Hey, what's going on guys, Khraze here and welcome back to another Outriders video. Today let's talk about all of the cool skills and passives that will progressively make you unstoppable as you go more and more into the end game. And trust me, what you're seeing right now in the free demo is not going to even begin to scratch the surface when it comes to the possible builds that you can create and how cool they can synergize between all of the passives, the actives, and the weapons and items that you will have on your character. So if you enjoyed this video at any time, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on it and let's jump right in. Anyway, let's begin with a few basics of the skill trees right here. You might be looking at them and thinking that they are a bit overcrowded, but it makes a lot of sense once you get a gist of it, and I'm going to show you some of the combinations and things to look at when you're going to create your own builds. So in Outriders, when you reach maximum level of 30, you're going to have a maximum of 20 class points as it's been confirmed up until today. What this means is that at no given time will you be able to fully unlock every single one of these major and minor passives in all of the skill lines. You will have to pick and choose, which brings us to the three possible skill lines that every single one of the classes in the game will have. In this case, we have a Trickster, but what I will tell you applies to all other characters in the game as well. So the very first line at the top is almost always going to deal with weapon damage and buffs that will provide additional bonus to that. That is why in the case of the Trickster, the Assassin is going to be your go-to line if you want to get as many bonuses towards different types of weapon damage. The second skill line, with one single exception, will almost always deal with damage mitigation in one way or another. So it's going to be all about tanking, like providing additional shields or additional armor or having less degradation on that. The only exception is, for example, in the case of the Technomancer, that instead of providing additional armor or shields is going to also have additional heals for himself and for his allies. So that's why in the case of the Technomancer, it's more going to be about supporting rather than tanking. The last one at the bottom is going to be all about anomaly power. Now, if you don't know what anomaly power is, it's basically your skill damage or your spell damage. You can even test that out in your inventory screen in the stats menu, and you're going to see that anomaly power over there in the middle. So this is going to be all about the damage and what your active skills are going to be capable of. You know, the ones that you unlocked at a certain level and actively use from your skill bar. Now, the next thing you're going to look for are going to be the nodes, and these are split into two categories. So we have the minor nodes, which are more numerous but also provide lower stats, and then there's going to be the major nodes that are bigger in size but also provide better bonuses and better passives, like for example a bigger bonus increase into damage or anomaly or defenses, or a bigger bonus when using certain abilities and whatnot. So in this case, you would be connecting the minor nodes to one another all the way up until you reach a major one that you really desire in order to increase certain capabilities of the build that you're creating. Now, I would not completely overlook the minor nodes because there are various major ones that do take them into account to increase their bonuses even more. One such example, and there's multiple of these for other classes as well, is the Assault Master for the Trickster, which is going to increase your assault weapon damage by 7% with each unlocked concentration class node. So in this case, concentration class node is basically the one that is connecting each of these rows. So as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, and there's a fourth one, a fifth one, and a sixth one right here in total in the Reaver skill line. So that would be 42% assault weapon damage increase if you also unlock these and the Assault Master major node to take advantage of all of these bigger and smaller nodes too. Now, usually the last major node in one particular skill line is also going to provide bigger than average bonuses. So for example, in the case of the Trickster's Assassin line, as you can see, the cold calculation can situationally be better than literally anything else in the game, because in this case it takes advantage of all of the enemies that might be nearby, so that it increases by 8% your weapon damage with each one of these. So if there's like 10 enemies, you can get like 80% damage increase when there's no other ability that can theoretically give you that by itself. And it goes the same with the other skill lines as well. The only other thing that I will mention about these major nodes is the fact that they can also be used as connecting nodes to other skill lines in case you want to dip your toes in multiple skill lines at the very same time. But in this case, because you only have 20 available class points, you will have to sacrifice, for example, not reaching all the way up until the end with one particular line, or having to sacrifice certain minor or major nodes in order to do that. But rest assured that this is going to give you the option to kinda go into the middle of a skill line instead of having to start from the very beginning and waste points over there where there's something that you might not desire when it comes to these passives. But with that being said and done, let's discuss a few possible builds that I already kinda got ready when the game is gonna come out, and this is kinda like my planned route for when I will reach level 30. Starting of course with the Trickster, and in this case I would likely go with a damage kind of build that focuses on piercing enemies' targets, dealing very high damage, and constantly spamming its abilities, as it would get multiple weapon damage buffs along the way. So that is why the minor nodes that you will see are going to be all about weapon damage increase. You can't really avoid these if you want to go through the next one, but along the way I got something like the Ace of Trumps, multiple of these at the same time, so there's at least a 30% armor piercing bonus at any given time on my build alone. Now, because this is going to be mainly a close range build, I've invested a few points into close range damage as well as shotgun damage. That's why I have the Shotgun Master for that additional 15% damage increase for that, and then there's also the Shotgun Adept in the last part of the line that further increases that by another 12%. But the three ones that will absolutely increase my damage with weapons to insane levels are going to be the Outrider Executioner, the Disruptive Firepower, and finally the Scion of the Power as an off cooldown ability. So let me explain that. First of all, starting with the Disruptive Firepower, this just increases my weapon damage by 50% for 8 seconds when using a Deception skill. In this case, because I really like that time bubble with a slow trap, I would be using that since that is a Deception skill. The second one is going to be the same, but in this case it activates for movement abilities, so that would be Hunt the Prey, since I like that a lot, and it's on a relatively low cooldown of about only 10 seconds with this skill line alone. So you can see where I'm going with this one. I would be activating that movement ability to teleport behind enemies. It would give me a 50% damage increase with weapons. Then I would activate a time bubble for another 50% damage increase with that, and then maybe even pop up something like a Twisted Rounds ability to further increase my damage, and I would have a 100% damage increase from the two major bonuses right there and the one from the active ability right here. So I would be dealing a ton of damage along the way. But as I've said, because I'm also using the Twisted Rounds, I'm also taking advantage of the Scion of the Power. So when my damage ability skill ends, in this case those Twisted Rounds, I would further get another 50% damage for another 8 seconds, so that even after all of these buffs end, I still have another active weapon damage buff increase for my character, so that I don't drop off too much. And this is, by the way, before the cold calculation that further increases the damage even more. So if I were to like pick, let's say, at least 5 enemies in a bubble, just between cold calculation and the Outrider and the Disruptive Executioner, I would get at least 140% damage increase just because there's enemies around me and just because I'm using these abilities that have a low cooldown. And this is just one of the examples. There's going to be an even better one for the Devastator. So for the Devastator, this is likely going to be the first character and build that I will create, because this, at least in theory, sounds insane. So this is going to be like a vampire build that applies a bleed to the enemies but also leeches that and constantly heals over time, as well as getting a ton of anomaly power and armor along the way. So in this skill line there are 4 nodes. Even though they are small nodes, they provide huge benefits to making this build work. So 2 of them are the 2 Red Rivers that each provide a 30% additional duration to bleed, so 60% in total, and the same goes with the 2 Bloodbaths. So each of these provides 30% more damage with bleed effects, and in total 60% between the 2 of these. Now, why would these be important in the first place? Well, simply because there's a major node that makes all of this complete, called the Blood Donation, which heals you the 35% of the bleed damage that you're applying on the target. So that means that even against bosses, even against enemies that you can't kill outright, you will still constantly be healed just because you apply bleeds against those targets or against that target. And if you couple this with a way to constantly apply bleeds onto the enemy, like for example the legendary Migraine that does exactly that, you can see where I'm going with this one. It's going to make that bleed build right there really insane. Even more so since there are a few rejuvenation kind of nodes along the way that further increase the leech capabilities of your guns. But this is not where it stops. There's actually a couple of really awesome synergies here with the major nodes that further increase my anomaly power and my armor too for additional tankiness. These two are Paladin, major one, as well as the Protected by the Anomaly, another major node. So let me explain. The first one, when I'm using a protection skill, like for example in this case a Golem, it would increase my anomaly power by 45% for 10 seconds. And keep in mind, Golem is on a really low cooldown and has instant activation. But what makes it so cool is that there's also Protected by the Anomaly, which increases my armor bonus by 40% of my anomaly. My anomaly power that just got buffed by that Paladin skill that I just talked about. And this isn't where it all ends, by the way. The last one in the Seismic Shifter further increases my base damage with seismic abilities by another 50%, so another way to buff up the damage from abilities. And there's also one that increases my armor and resistance by 20% simply when a skill ends. And finally there's that heirloom armor that provides me 20% of the armor an enemy had when I kill it in close range, so I can stack armor for days. And because I'm stacking armor, it buffs up my anomaly power, which further increases and again buffs up my armor again. So it kind of all synergizes together and goes to extreme ends. And this is just, by the way, for the armor. It's not even taking into account the fact that I'm constantly healing over time just by dealing damage. These are just two examples, by the way. There's going to be many more coming up, but when that info gets released, I'm also going to be on top of things and I will keep you guys updated with a whole bunch of really awesome builds and ideas like these. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.